Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. Really appreciate everybody joining us. Hopefully get some good stuff, information out of this. Let's see. I have a bunch of first-time attendees that I can see, so I'll go over some quick logistics. We do webinars 4 or 5 times a month, and in this type of webinar, I can't hear you. So if you've signed into the audio, and expect to throw out a question, that's going to have to go into the chat panel or the Q&A panel on the WebEx interface. Go ahead and put those in at any time. I'll try to answer it during the presentation, but if not, there is a Q&A section at the end. This Jumpstart webinar is something that we do live every month, although we have recorded them and put them up on the website occasionally. So if you need that, let me know or let us know, and we can send you a link if you can't find it on the website. But typically we try to do them live to be interactive and responsive to questions. Also, you get a follow-up survey. Let us know how we did today. Appreciate that. Speaking of surveys, if you haven't received, we do a year-end survey. If you haven't received information on that, let us know that you'd like to fill that out. We'd always appreciate you signing up for that, filling that out. Let's see what else, some other logistics. On that survey, if you give us your t-shirt size, we'll send you a free t-shirt just for joining us today. We show our appreciation. So let's go ahead and get started here. Again, thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Scott Courtier. I'm Senior Technical Sales with InduSoft, and today's agenda, I'm going to go a brief overview of InduSoft, the company, InduSoft, the product. We'll get into the demo that ships with the product, installs when you install InduSoft Web Studio. Then a majority of this presentation will be kind of a product demo to show you the ins and outs of how to get going quickly, show you where you can find additional resources, and then, if you need to, how to get a hold of us. Today's focus is for the new user. So we expect that you probably have some HMI experience, drawing packages, buttons and lights, and maybe even some PLC experience, although none of that's really required. I'm going to show you kind of the basics and getting started. This is really considered an accelerating learning curve, or what we're calling a jumpstart. This came out of, after teaching many, many training classes all over the world, I kind of realized that InduSoft, some people pick it up quickly, some people don't, and I shouldn't say that. Most people pick it up pretty quickly, but there's always a little bit differences between other packages that you've used and this package. And so what I want to show you here is how to develop screens, how to deploy this, how to find things in the help manual, and where you can find additional resources. This is not meant to be a training class, not meant to be a full show you everything from beginning to end, but it will give you a great start, and again, show you how to find information if you need to. There is a full training class, if you didn't know this, full training class video session. There's, I think, 40 different videos that you can either download or stream. In addition to attending a live class, we have those in either our Texas facility in Austin, or we're hosting those now also in Lake Forest in California as well. So check our website for those schedules. Again, really appreciate you joining us, and if you have any questions, put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel. I'll try to get to those during the presentation. I've been told via survey to kind of cut down on the company and product information a little bit and get right into the kind of hands-on session, which I'll do. I originally did this because many of you may not have made the decision to use InduSoft and then handed it and said, here, do this, and might not know some of the background or, more importantly, some of the features that the product has, because it's a pretty broad, comprehensive product, and not so many people realize that it can do so many things. So I'll keep this kind of short. We've been around since 1997. It's the first package really for Windows CE and we've been doing this for now about 20 years, a little over 20 years now. And some key things. We have a patent for our database connectivity, which I'll demonstrate the database connectivity. We've now got OPC UA, both client and server, and our support for HTML5 is pretty easy to do. I should be able to show you that, given I don't have any network problems. And let's see, skipping ahead here. If you didn't know this, we've won numerous awards from Control Engineering Magazine, and this is not voted on by advertising dollars. This is actually by readers like yourselves. And so we won in 2017, and we're up as a finalist for the 2018 award as well. And I think there's only 1 or 2 more days left to vote, so go to our website, and in the next day or so, when this video gets posted and these slides get posted, there's a link here, but you can just go to our homepage and vote for that as well. So do that soon because time is running out. And if you're not a subscriber, you can sign up and then immediately go vote, which is kind of nice. Okay, enough of that. Thank you for your consideration there. A little bit about the product. We try to be talk to anything over any network, any data using open standards. And I'm going to talk a lot about open standards as this presentation goes on, and of course with security in mind. So we try to keep that involved. Now, what vertical markets are we in? You can see numerous different industries, but I like to point out this and others because we're really in just about every industry that you can imagine. You know, all kinds of things all over the world. It's been really interesting working with InduSoft over the years and getting to travel and see some of these different applications. But I want to point out, why the heck is this important to you if you're not in one of these other industries? Well, one of the neat things that we've done at InduSoft is we try to put new features into the product just as standard features. We don't make them available as external modules that you have to pay extra for. No, we don't do that. For example, the pharmaceutical industry, some customers a few years ago, many years ago, asked us to put features in that are for an FDA, a U.S. Food and Drug Administration standard called 21 CFR Part 11. And that CFR, which is called Code of Federal Regulations, has to do with traceability, trackability, and security. And when we added those features, we didn't make them an extra module. We just made them part of the product. And now with water and wastewater, you know, food and beverage requiring those same traceability and trackability features, they're just part of the product. And we do that. And so no matter what industry you're in, you get to take advantage of those features. Okay. Enough about the company. Now onto the product. So what is it? We consider it an easy-to-use, yet still very powerful and flexible, very affordable HMI and SCADA software. Why do I point this out? Some people use this as maybe a low-end HMI system. The fact that we did Windows CE, we kind of really had a major push with Windows CE years and years ago, might know us as only low-end HMI and not realize how scalable the product is. And we go up to 10 million tags, the same feature set at the 10 million tags as the 150 tag version makes it, again, very scalable, very just affordable and powerful to use on just desktop PCs, servers, industrial PCs, embedded and mobile devices. In the past, we've run kind of exclusively on Windows, but the full range of Windows, whether it be Windows CE, Windows Embedded, Windows Desktop, and even server editions. And within the last 3 or 4 years, we've come out with Linux and VxWorks versions. So this is where this, what we're calling platform agnostic capabilities come into play, that you can take a project that you've developed, let's say on Windows CE, deploy it on Windows Embedded, deploy it on Windows Desktop, or even server, or even Linux, and without any changes whatsoever. Makes it really nice, really flexible. So an average deployment, you might take your laptop and development environment. So there's really kind of 2 pieces of the software, the development and the runtime. You take that development environment, configure your screens, draw your screens, your objects, configure animations, how is it going to communicate to PLCs, databases, etc., and then transfer that to a runtime. And that could be done either over Ethernet, over wireless, satellite communications, even dial-up if you wanted to, where that then runtime will then connect to one or more PLCs, multiple databases, OPCs, or all of them combined simultaneously. And then you don't need to have the development environment still connected. The runtime does its thing, just keeps it on running there. So let's just kind of touch on some other architectures here where you might have that runtime server shown on the previous page and now add it to a network, and where you can get what we call thin clients, where they're just other PCs. There's no special hardware. I'm showing some industrialized PCs here, where these could be maybe office PCs, maybe in a production supervisor's office, a maintenance supervisor's office, and with Internet Explorer, show the screens that are running on the runtime server in those various offices. The second type of thing, so that was the first one. So with Internet Explorer, we call that thin client Web Thin Client. And Web Thin Client needs to have Internet Explorer, so that needs to be a Windows-based machine. So we've had that for years, and then customers asked us, hey, I don't want Internet Explorer out on my plant floor, but I've got a duplicate. I want to put a duplicate or many duplicate HMIs. I have a large machine or a long process that I want to spread that out over. In that case, you do maybe industrial PCs like shown here, or even desktop PCs with another type of thin client that we call Secure Viewer. Now, Secure Viewer also has to be on a Windows-based PC, but the screens go edge to edge. There's no browser involved at that point. It looks just like the runtime. That's because it is really a remote runtime that gets its screens and data from the real runtime. And so we've had both of those, Web Thin Client and Secure Viewer, for years. And then a while ago, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, we made a decision to start building on HTML5. And why is that important? Well, that is important because now you can use things like iPads, Android phones, iPhones, Android tablets, any real device that you can get an HTML5 browser on. You can then point it back at the runtime server, and you don't need to install an app. Your customer doesn't need to install an app. We don't need to maintain it. You don't need to maintain it. So it's a really nice thing. So that allows you to, again, view and interact with those screens remotely. And you can have all, and that third type is called an SMA or Studio Mobile Access client. You can have all three of those on a network. And with the version 8.1 that's been out for a little while now, you can mix and match those, and you don't have to license those independently like you used to. You just pick the total number of thin clients, and you can put as many Web Thin Clients, Secure Viewers, and SMA Thin Clients that will total up to your total number of licensed thin clients that you have, so you can mix and match. Makes it a little bit more flexible that way. Here's a slide that shows all the different features that we have. I'm not going to go into all these different details. I'm going to show you a lot of these, but it's a tag-based system. We can do translation. We've got this remote management tool that allows you to connect up to the remote runtime, download, stop, start your project, even troubleshoot it. Your thin client, your email, FTP, 2 different security systems. Set up your tasks to configure alarms, trends, recipes, reports, some scripting, things of that nature, communications, either using our over 250 built-in drivers or the various OPC clients that we have. We have shapes and active objects that you can draw and configure your screens as necessary. These 3 really powerful data objects, alarms, alarm event object trends, grid, nice animations, symbol library of over 1,000 symbols, the ability to put .NET and ActiveX, and we now even have this thing called a custom widget that allows you to put JavaScript, HTML5, and CSS into an object on the screen as well. So very, very flexible there. So here's what I was talking about, the portability aspect of this, that you can develop your project and deploy it on either InduSoft's full runtime, or the license that we call Embedded View, and that runs on Windows Embedded. That'll run also on Windows 10, Windows IoT, or what do they call that? Windows IoT Enterprise, I think that's called. Windows Embedded Compact, if you're going to do on Windows CE, they call that Windows, we call that CE View. And now if you're on Linux, we call that IoT View. So again, deploy that on any of those. I had a customer recently that wanted me to kind of prove this and show this to a customer. We were in there in the morning, developed a project in just a couple of hours that ran on their Windows CE device. Then we deployed it to their Windows Embedded Standard 7 device. And then from there, we published those screens and made it available on their iPads and Android phones that they had in the office, and they loved it. They showed it to a customer that afternoon, and they kind of went wild about it, just how flexible that was, that it was one project that got developed and deployed in all of those places. So yes, we're ready, running on Windows 10. Believe it or not, some of our competitors still don't run on Windows 10. And so we have this thing that we call investment protection. And for any of you who know me, many of you on this WebEx probably will not, but before I was an InduSoft employee, which is now going on 10 years, I was actually a customer. And back in the late 90s, I developed a project that's still in use today. And recently that customer came to us and said, hey, we want to take advantage of some of the features that are in version, this was 8.0, that are the new version features. They thought, what kind of a pain is it going to be to bring my project from one of those early versions from the 1990s into today's version? And we said, no problems whatsoever. Just open up the project, and there it is, and it'll work fine. And they did that. They implemented the new features, and they deployed it no problems. So again, unlike some of our competitors who tend to reinvent the wheel, make incompatible versions every 3 or 4 years, make you rework your whole project with no import utilities or anything like that, I think this can be a big, big time saver for you. This is something that we plan on continuing on. Database interface uses standard technologies to interface to whether it's Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, Sybase, SAP, you name it, could be historians like from OSI. We can even communicate with Microsoft Access or Excel as databases. And when you do this with our objects down here in the bottom right-hand corner, our alarm history, our events, trends, our grid object, what's really neat is you don't even need to know SQL, and I'm going to demonstrate that. So it handles the SQL behind the scenes for you. And what's really neat is there's redundancy and store and forward features built in that are just part of the product. No additional modules to buy, nothing else to install. You kind of just check a checkbox and tell it to go ahead and do that. So this diagram, if you look at the center of this and think of the InduSoft Web Studio tags at the core of this diagram, many of you will understand that if you're communicating with a PLC or multiple PLCs, you get that information into tags, and then you'll be able to use it on screens or send it to a database or any way that you want to use that information. But this diagram shows you that not only can you communicate with one of our over 250 different drivers, but you can also communicate via OPC DA or UA, XML or .NET clients. You can also be an OPC server. In addition to the OPC DA server, in version 8.1, we've now come out with a UA server. So that allows third-party clients to then come by and get the InduSoft tag information out of there. You can retrieve information from websites. You can send information to and from databases. There are even toolkits that will allow you to write your own drivers or interface with our databases as well if you need to do that. But a couple of things to think about. Installing multiple drivers, and just before we came out with 8.1, we announced that we are not going to limit you on the number of drivers that you can install in a project. That's really only going to be limited by the amount of hardware and RAM and hard drive space and ports on your computer. But now you can install different drivers, many different drivers in a project. And for example, if you've got a Modbus PLC talking to an Allen Bradley. Well, you can talk to those simultaneously and share information between those dissimilar brands of PLCs. That could be a big advantage to people. You could get information in addition to PLCs. We communicate to lots and lots of things, whether it be temperature controllers, motion control, barcodes, RFID, etc. Picture this, and we've been doing this for over 20 years, and a lot of our drivers, in addition to being Ethernet, are also serial. So RS-232, RS-485. So think of this. What if you had a old RS-485 based temperature controller that you were able to read the information into tags and then log data to a database? Who would have thought that you could have taken a 10, 15, 20-year-old temperature controller and log data to a database? Well, InduSoft Web Studio will let you do that. And notice that all of these arrows are bidirectional. So into the tags, you can get information from drivers from any of these sources and send it to any of these other sources as well. So really big platform to be able to share information between those different architectures. Okay, I talked a bit about the web thin clients, secure viewer thin clients, and I'm actually going to demonstrate SMA thin clients. I'm going to open up Chrome and show you the screens that we developed today on Chrome and how that could be done on an external device, whether it be a tablet or a phone as well. So the product, if you didn't know, is actually licensed by tag count. The minimum development environment is a 1,500 tag, but we have run times that go down as far as 300 and 150 tags, and we go all the way up to 10 million tags. This diagram, this chart, used to have the number of drivers listed over here, and we've since, in essentially version 8.1, removed the limit of the drivers. So if you're interested in new 8.1, we have a promotion going on before the end of the year. Talk to your salesperson or contact us at info@InduSoft and see about that before the end of the year as well. All right, one more thing to mention before we get moving into the demo is the migration tool. If you didn't know this, we have an import wizard for FactoryTalk, both ME and SE from Rockwell Automation. Now, FactoryTalk is a Rockwell Automation product. It's not an InduSoft product, but if you've got a project that you've created in FactoryTalk View ME or SE, you can now use our import tool to bring that project into InduSoft Web Studio. And a couple of things. You can then it becomes just a standard InduSoft project that you can add on, enhance, talk to databases, change graphically, communications, etc. So you can still do manual adjustments after the conversion comes in. And we've been told by several groups that this has saved them as much as 85% of their development time. Some more, some less. No import tool is 100%, but just wanted to make you aware that we have that. All right. Before we start the PC demo, I'm going to mute myself for just a second here and take a quick drink of water. Excuse me for a second. Okay, I'm back. Just as a reminder, I saw several people have signed in since we started. If you have questions, please put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel. See some people saying hi. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to get into PC demo. What is it? Well, it is a demo that is included and installed if you left the checkbox checked when you installed InduSoft Web Studio. It'll be there. And it demonstrates most of the features of the products. For those of us who are in sales, we often use it as a sales tool. But today I want to point out to you to use it as a technical reference. I want you to look at, hey, how did InduSoft do this in the demo? How do they make it do that? How do they make it do this one thing? Well, go ahead and open up the project, copy the code that we've done, or copy the object and paste it into your project, and feel free to use it as a technical reference to help you understand how we've done that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in InduSoft Web Studio, And here's PC demo. And many of you will have, the first thing that you've done is you've created a new project and maybe didn't even know that PC demo existed. So if you didn't know that it existed, here's where you can find it. You can go up here to the quick access toolbar up here and go to the open icon or to the file icon and then go to open project here. And let me show you where that's found. You can go to open project, and where that's often found is under documents. And if you go to where InduSoft Web Studio projects are, you're going to also find a folder here for InduSoft Web Studio version 8.1 demo. Now, if you're running the version 8.0, you're going to find that down under the W's. We were under the Wonderware brand name here, so you'd find it here under 8.0. But if you're running the 8.1 version, now you would find that under InduSoft Web Studio version 8.1 demo here. And just go into PC demo and then open up the .app file, and that's where you're going to find this project. Now, if I run this project, and I can do that either again from this quick access toolbar or from this local management section here. And if I run this project, that'll go ahead and launch. And so this is my development environment, and when this opens up, this will be my runtime environment. And that will then show here as a multitude of screens. So this demo is actually made up of this thin slice up at the top is a screen. This menu down the left-hand side is a different screen. This very thin status bar down on the bottom is a third screen, and kind of this work area in the middle here is a fourth screen. And we put that all together and using what we call screen groups, so that we can group all of those together and open them up with just one command. So I'm going to rifle through here, show you that we can do bar graphs, colors, there's pop-up keypads, and yes, you can scale these keypads. There's numeric and alphanumeric keypads, 3 different versions of those. There's visibility and even transparency. You can see this puff of smoke here kind of becoming more and less transparent. This bitmap that we've brought into this meter, we've put a line over the top of it and rotated it. You can rotate objects. It doesn't have to be on the object, the rotation point. It can be off in space somewhere. Resize, here we're resizing this flame, both width and height. You can move things position-wise, both horizontally and vertically. Now here I'm doing this with my mouse, but the actual values could come from tags or PLC values into tags and position that. You could lock it into just a vertical movement or just a horizontal movement. If you want to show, let's say, a conveyor or a robot kind of thing. We can launch PDFs either in Adobe Acrobat as a separate external window like this, which we just, in this case, I've just launched the manual for the Modbus TCP help system. Or you can embed, let's say, a Windows or Microsoft browser, and if you've got Adobe Acrobat installed and got the helper files in there, it'll open up inside of your project, not in an external window like this. So either way is possible. So I'm going to come back to this manual in a little while, so I'm just going to move this off screen. And we can do hyperlinks and open up web pages. We can send emails with attachments. Active objects, you can see here there's a number of things that will help build your application in a way that makes sense, whether it's a combo box drop-down, radio buttons, check boxes, list boxes, smart messages. Basically, you put a whole bunch of messages in there and then point to those as maybe an integer changes value or however you want to call those up, you just point to those. Here's our grid object. I'm going to actually demonstrate that in a little bit here, pulling from a database. This lets you pull from a text file, database, or even a class tag, if you will. And then here's an example of ActiveX or .NET. Now this is actually a Windows media player showing a video of a bottling line or a capping line. But this could very well be a help video or a training video to show a maintenance person or an operator how to perform a feature on a machine or in a process or what to look out for. When you think about where we've come with HMIs over the years, HMIs used to replace buttons, lights, and meters. Well, now there's so much more than that. And if you think of a machine as a printing press for money, and every time you spit a product out at the end, that's profit. Well, if your machine is stopped, then it's not printing money, and we try to give you the tools to reduce your downtime. If it happens to stop, get it going quickly, and whether that's with a video, a PDF, an HTML help file, those can help you get going quickly. Built into the product are also recipes, reports. Now, many of you will have seen the reports as just text. Well, that's kind of the most basic. You can take snapshots of tags and then put them into a text file. I'm going to skip over kind of these here in the middle, but we can also do reports as HTML. Now, here's a very simplified HTML report. This is going to probably open up off screen here. I'm not quite sure where this is going to go. This is printed a report with this nice graphic embedded in here, different size, different color fonts, and then embedded an HTML table here. Now, I've done applications where this is printed invoices, turn this into a PDF, sent it to a printer, so it can be very, very flexible in that regard. Even embed trend graphics on that. Speaking of trends, here is a trend. Now, in this case, we've got 4 pens on this trend, but you can really put as many as your computer will allow you to, based on memory, based on performance that you want to have happen. I guess what I'm getting at is, unlike some of our competitors that only allow you for 8 or 4 or 16, you can put as many as you want to on here and probably get too crowded for you to be able to read. But you can hide pens. So, for example, if I want to compare this top sine wave to this bottom square wave, how would I do that? Well, first let me pause this, and if I click on the trend, I'm going to get this vertical line. Hopefully this shows up on the WebEx okay, this cursor. Wherever that crosses the pens, it's going to show me down here in this column called cursor the value of where that point crosses. So let's say, again, I wanted to compare this top sine wave with this bottom square wave. I can hide these middle 2 pens just by clicking on this little eyeglass column here, and now I can compare this maybe a little bit better. Well, maybe that's still not enough. They're still on separate axes, so we can click on this icon up here to kind of merge those axes, so now they're on the same axes, and let's say this is the point that I wanted to compare. Then I can get that actual information. Maybe that's still not enough, and maybe I want to show this a little bit more zoomed in. I could pick this zoom tool. By the way, this works with multi-touch, so you can use 2 fingers and pinch and zoom, pan this back and forth. But let's say I wanted to pick this horizontal tool here and say, okay, this will be my left starting point, my right ending point, and zoom in on that and say, oh, that's the point that I want right there. You can see how you can really drill into this data. You can also set this duration. This is hours, minutes, and seconds. And this date and time here essentially is your right edge, which is usually now when you're in run mode. And then this duration spans over here to this left edge. And you can set that up to go back in history, days, weeks, months, years. And you can even set the colors and change these properties during runtime and save those off into files during runtime with names. So if you want a weekly view, an hourly view, Joe, you want to have a view, Bill has his own view, you can set up an interface to be able to save those off and create those however you want to. So let's put this back to the way that I had it. I'm going to cancel this. Zoom, I'm going to unmerge these axes. I'm going to unhide those 2 pens and then put it back in run, even though it was logging in the background at that time. So there, I think I got it back to the way that it was. There's alarms built into this product, real-time or online alarms, and then historical as well. What's really kind of neat is you can filter this. So your alarms objects basically see all the alarms in the entire system, and then you can tell it to filter what do you want to see, what do you not want to see. And there's this filtering interface, this dialog box that pops up, or you can create your own or do this during development. We're very, very flexible however you want it to. And if you have multi-touch, you can move things around on the screen. I don't have a multi-touch monitor here, but you can also swipe to change screens. You can put 2 fingers on this knob and rotate it. You can even grab the alarms and slide those up and down here. So a lot of features with multi-touch built in. And there's some really neat demos here for different industries, whether they're stamping, bioenergy. Here's a nice example where we've brought in a 3D CAD image and animated over the top of it with tanks and different vessels, put some symbols on here with lights and buttons. So I just wanted to kind of walk you through this and show all the different capabilities are in here. And again, feel free to use these in your own project and learn from this as well. Also in here, if you're into packaging, there's a PackML template that's live. You can actually step through this. OEE for overall equipment effectiveness. You can point to the different machines. You can do day, week, month, year, and get different data values. So if you're into, again, overall equipment effectiveness, typically in a manufacturing environment, that will help you point out your biggest time losses. And if you can fix those, you can get higher performance, higher quality out of your machines. There's also and-on in here, so you can view on a big screen, maybe a video wall comprised of multiple screens. The largest I've ever done has been 8 70-inch monitors tied together. That was a huge application. You can also do this in different languages. So, for example, if I come in here and I change to Portuguese or Spanish, let's say, you can get, again, different languages. We can even support, let's say, Japanese, kanji, katakana, hiragana, fonts, and you get to choose what you want to be translated and what you don't want to be translated. Let me clarify that. This doesn't actually do the translation. You have to have that done externally, whether it's Google Translate or human translation, but it can choose to change the text and the fonts on whatever objects you want to or don't want to. Let me put this back to English so I make sure that I can read this for the rest of the day here. And then there's security on this if you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and log out of this. And again, if you have questions, put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel. I'll try to get to those while I'm presenting. But if not, there is a Q&A section at the end. So now what everybody's been waiting for is kind of the let's start building an application and step you through kind of the process to do that. So today we're going to build a screen. We're going to put some shapes and animations on there. The main thing that I'm going to do today is put a bar and a slider on there and slide that up and down. With that, then we're going to put a tag on it. We're going to trend that. We're going to trend it to a database. And then if time allows, we'll put a grid object on and see if we can't see this in a SMA thin client. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the reason I've put this up here is we're eventually going to put 3 different screens, a header, a navigation down the left-hand side, and kind of a main work area. You don't have to do this. You can set up the screens any way that you want to with just one full-size area, or in this case, I'm going to have 3. You could do it with 2. You could do it with 5. Your choice. Again, you don't have to split the screens up this way. It just makes it a little bit more consistent, and so you don't have to repeat the menu and maybe the company logo and the time up here. Makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to go down to the next screen here. You know what? Let me get started doing this before I do that. So what I'm going to do is go back to the development environment. I'm going to start a new project. Now I could go up here to this quick access toolbar. Let me point that out before I go on. This quick access toolbar, like many other Windows-based programs, can be customized. So if I pull this down and go to more commands, I can actually customize what is shown on my quick access toolbar. In this case, I actually have, mine's going to be a little bit different probably than yours. I have this fit to window because I do a lot of big screen applications and I want to show all the information that I can in the size that it's allotted, so I've added that to mine. But I wanted to point out, if you're a kind of a Windows Power user, you might have keyboard shortcuts that you like to use. Well, you can add keyboard shortcuts to those and keep your hands from moving back and forth between the keyboard and the mouse. So that makes things pretty powerful there. So what I'm going to do is create a new project. So up here on this quick access toolbar, I could go to new, or I could go to the file icon and go new here. In this case, I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call this by today's Jumpstart. What is the date today? Today's the 2017-12, the 18th or the 19th? I think today's the 19th. And then I'm going to choose my license type. Now, this is a filtering field here. So my license, I probably have more different types than you do, because my tag count goes up to 10 million. Your list might look a little different. And this filtering, this will show all of the different license types that you have in this field. If you only want embedded, let's say you're going to do Windows CE or Linux, you would choose one of these embedded, and then this would filter and just show you those different types of licenses that are supported for the embedded license. Otherwise, you would pick Windows and see just the licenses that are supported for Windows desktop operating systems or Windows Server operating systems. So here you can see there's the 150 tags, 300 tags, 1,500 tags. Many of you yours will just stop there. 4,000, 16,000, all the way up to 10 million if you have that licensed. So for today's demo, I'm just going to pick the local interface, which is 1,500 tags. I probably won't need that many. I'm going to click on OK here. And now this will give you the choice of choosing a resolution from this list of resolutions. When we started developing this product years ago, there was only a few different display sizes that are out. There was 320 by 240, 640 by 480, 800 by 600, 1024 by 768. There weren't too many more. And we added and added and added and tried to keep up with the display manufacturers. Finally, we realized we can't keep up with all the different displays that are out there. So you can just choose custom here and put in whatever height and width that you want, as small as 240, as large as 10,000 by 10,000. So if you're familiar with like a high-def monitor, here's 1920 by 1080. If you put in 10,000 by 10,000, that's actually 45 high-def monitors tied together. So that if you can find the hardware to do that, I'd love to see it. Again, the largest I've ever seen has been 8 70-inch monitors tied together. For today's demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose 1024 by 768. That's going to let me show you some of the scalability features of this. Well, my monitor here is actually 1920 by 1080. I'm going to choose 1024 by 768. That's a pretty common industrial PC size these days. I'm going to click on OK, and this will make my folder, my project folder on the hard drive. So what this has just done, if I open up my File Explorer here, and of course this showed up off screen, what this has done in my InduSoft Web Studio folder, let me go down to the letter I here, go to InduSoft Web Studio Projects, and for today's Jumpstart, it made this folder called Jumpstart with the name that I used up here. Now in that folder, it's going to be subfolders for your alarms, your configuration, your tag database, your trend history, your screens, any symbols that you've added to your project, and anything that you have going on the web. So everything that you have is created in that folder. There are tools that we have, and I'll show you some of those that help you keep things all in this folder, which makes it really nice, because if you ever have to archive this, that's all you have to do is zip this folder up, and your entire project is backed up. There's a few different ways you can do a send to compressed folder, or if you use an external zip utility like I use 7-zip here, you can zip that up and just very quickly back up your project. So we're going to start here by creating a new screen, and just a quick reference. Over here on the left-hand side is this Project Explorer that has 4 different tabs: Global, Graphics, Tasks, and Communications. Global is basically your project tags, some other things that are global, your event logger, translation, some global scripting procedures, security system, graphics, typically where you're going to find your screens and symbols, tasks are things where you're going to configure your alarm set points, trends, recipes, reports, some other scripting, some database connections, communications for any drivers or any OPC clients that you want to add in. And then you have these troubleshooting tools down here, database spy, output window. And one of the things that I've seen new users do is accidentally move these or close these all together, trying to get some more space, and then they go, how do I get those back? Well, a quick way is just to go up here to this View tab and click on this Restore Default, and then it'll put everything back to the way that it was. So a lot of times in training classes at this point, people go, oh, that's how you do that. You can set these up where you can have them kind of auto-collapse like your taskbar in Windows. So if I want a little bit more space, I can set this up for auto-hide, and I can work in this area, and then when I need it, I can move my mouse over this, and it'll fly out, do my things, move my mouse away, and it'll self-collapse. So if you need some more room, that's another way to do that. But what I'm going to do here is go under Graphics, right-click on Screens, and insert a new screen. Now notice that this screen is 1024 by 768 because that's what I set up my default for my project. We just did a webinar. It's recorded on the website. I'll show you where to find those on scaling and choosing resolutions for your project. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details there, but just so you know, that's up on the website. So this is 1024 by 768. I'm not going to make any other changes. I'm going to click on OK. And so that's going to be 1024 by 768. And what I said I wanted to do first was put a rectangle on the screen. Actually, this is going to become a bar graph. I could do this with a closed polygon or several other objects that I'm going to turn into a bar graph. But right now, I'm just going to show you a rectangle. It's kind of the easiest one to understand and conceptualize. Here is the rectangle. I can change the border, the colors, the thickness, the background color. I can even do gradient fill, for example, if I wanted this to be range of colors, from dark to light, etc. And I could put a text caption on there if I wanted. But I wanted you to see this rectangle configuration. I'll move that out of the way. Then I don't have a PLC hooked up today. So what I'm going to do is simulate with using one of our symbols from our symbol library. Notice here this says project symbols, and right now this is empty, and then this says symbols. The difference between those two, this symbols is your global symbol library that gets installed when you install InduSoft Web Studio. And whenever you use any of those, they get copied into your project symbols. That way, if you make any changes to them, it doesn't destroy your global symbol library. Let me show you how this works here. So if I go into symbols and I go into system symbols and say, okay, eventually what I'm going to do is put a slider on there. But I just wanted to show you we've got some nice buttons, pilot lights, some 3D motors, some switches, tanks, and we're adding to this all the time. If you've got any suggestions of something that you want, let us know. I'm going to show you a section on the website that's our symbol of the week. But let me go back here to sliders. I'm going to add slider 1 because I know that goes from 0 to 100%. And on this, I'm going to add 0 to 100% here in just a second. So I've added this symbol from this symbol library, and what it's done is it's made a copy of that in this project symbols. It's added slider 1 in there. So I don't overwrite my global symbols if I make any changes to that, which I'm going to do here in a little bit to show you that. So here, let's go back to this rectangle, and I'm going to double click on that, and you can see that rectangle properties here again. While that is selected, I'm going to come over here to animations and add a bar graph animation to that. Now what that's done is it's kept that rectangle, and you can see here how this is indented. It's added that bar graph animation to that rectangle object. So here I can put in a tag. Now, before I put in the tag, I want to point out that you could go over here to your global tab under project tags, datasheet view, and you can type in here your tags and create tags. this list will expand. It's not just limited to this 4 or 5 that are shown here. You could also copy and paste from Excel. There are several instances where you can actually import from your PLC programming software as well. But today what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into this rectangle, and I'm just going to manually type temperature in here. And then when I hit enter, it's going to prompt me. It says, hey, this tag doesn't exist. Well, how does that know that it's a tag, first of all, and how does it know that it doesn't exist? Well, first of all, tags have to start with a letter. The first character has to be a letter. After that, they can be letters, numbers, or the underscore character. There's nothing else that they can be. Letters, numbers, underscores, first character has to be a letter. So what happened is when I put in a letter in here, or the beginnings of a tag, it then knew, hey, since that's a letter, go back and compare this against the tag tags that exist or the functions that exist. If it was a function, it would have parentheses at the end of it. Since there's no parentheses, it must be a tag, and that tag doesn't exist. Do you want to create it? So I'm going to say yes, and then it's going to prompt me, do I want this to be an array, Boolean, integer, real, or a string? I'm just going to keep this as an integer for now and say OK. And so that tag is now created again over here in my project tags data sheet view. You can see that it created this as an integer. It's not an array. So I can close that. And this bar graph will grow. I don't know if this comes through very well on the WebEx. This is a dark blue color. But I could have very easily put color animation, a visibility position animation, a resize, all simultaneously on that rectangle. Again, notice how this is just that same rectangle with several different animations applied to it. Now these, if I want to turn these off, these are like kind of like checkboxes. You can think of these as just unchecking. So I could click them again and it will remove those from that rectangle. So it's, again, it's still just that rectangle with, I turn those on and turn those back off. So now I've just left it with a bar graph animation here. Now this is going to go from 0 to 100 temperature, and this symbol, because it's a percentage, goes 0 to 100. I could change this if I wanted to, but in this field here, notice this is blank. I'm going to point this out in a little while. Notice these two columns, property and value, and notice this is min, max, and tag name. Notice this is 0, 100, and then blank. Again, I'm going to point that out when we get to the symbols section here in a few minutes. But I want this to tie to the temperature tag. I don't want to type this in again, so we just need to double click on this field. And if you've been using InduSoft for a little while, many of you will maybe have double clicked on this field and expect to get the pop-up that allows you to pick the tag. But when I double clicked, look what happened. It put my cursor in there. Rather than being on that field already and double clicking, if you're off of that field and you double click, that's when it pulls up the object finder. That's one of those little things that a lot of people don't realize. Like they struggle with, when do I double click? Why does it just go in there? And they start clicking around, getting frustrated. Well, there's a method to this madness. And if you are on that cell already and you double click, it will leave you in edit mode. There's a cursor there. If you click off of that cell and then before selecting that field, just double click. So I'm going to double click, then it opens up the object finder. I can then choose my tag, click on OK, and then that tag is in there. I don't have to type that out. So I've got this temperature tag. It's going to go from 0 to 100 when I slide this up and down. I'm going to save this screen here, and I'm just going to call it main. And so what this has done here under graphics screen, this has made this the screen that I called main, but that doesn't automatically start up. If you've inherited a project from somebody else and you want to know out of the 10, 15, 20 thousands of screens that are in there, which one starts up, you can go here under Project Viewer and see this startup screen. This is the screen that will be the startup screen when you start the project. This is also where you can set the startup screen. In this case, I'm not going to set it here. I wanted to point out that here under, we've developed a shortcut. So here under screens, if I've expanded screens here, I can right-click and say Set as Startup here, and I don't have to drill into that project viewer menu at all. I can just do this Set as Startup, and if I go back in here, I'll show you that it actually made that the startup. So with that, I can go ahead and run this project and show you that I can slide this slider up and down and see that change values. Now, I just happen to leave this at 70 here. What I want to do is I want to, many of you have gotten to this point and realized, hey, I don't have an exit button. How the heck do I get out of this? Well, you can do several things. Number one, in Windows, you can hold down your Alt key and then hold down the Tab key and get this little interface here where I can, I'm still holding down my Alt key and I'm hitting Tab, 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 and I can go back to my development environment. Here you can see that it's still running, and I could stop the project here. That's one way to do it. If I'm running, there is another Windows keystroke that I could do, which would be Alt and F4. Now, Alt and F4 will kill the program that currently has focus in Windows. Now, what this has done is stopped what's called the viewer. The viewer is what your screens paint on. Kind of think of it as like the canvas that your screens paint on. It's a separate executable. It's called viewer.exe. And if you notice down here in my taskbar, my TCP/IP server and my background tasks are actually still running. My project is still running. You just can't see the screens because the viewer is closed. So let me explain that a couple of different ways here. So let me stop this project. I'm going to, let's try running this again, and show you here my screen, which is 1024 by 768, has painted on the viewer that is full screen here, which is 1920 by 1080. So you can actually see this gray space here is actually the viewer, and my screen is only taking up part of that. And again, notice that this is at 70 here. And if I go back into my development environment, go into my database SPY and type in, let's say I type in 22, hit enter. Oh, sorry. I need a tag in here, temperature. And I don't want to type that, so let's cursor off of that, double click on that field, pick temperature, and you can see that it's 70. Now let's say I set that to 22. I Alt-Tab back to my runtime, and you can see that it's interacted with that tag and set that to 22. For example, if I set this up to 87 here, Alt-Tab back to my development environment, I can see and interact with that. So that gives me some troubleshooting, can I test my logic? Notice also here that this says tag/expression. That also lets me put in scripting expressions, the built-in scripting language. So I can test if I expect something to evaluate to true or false or 1, 2, 3, 4, and something's not changing color or not coming out to the right value, I can actually use this database SPY to do some really nice troubleshooting. Let me open up the help system here, which is just here with help on this little book, and then go to Introduction, Internal Structure and Data Flow. When I go to this, I have to scroll down just a little bit here, and I get this diagram. And again, I hope this is coming through on the WebEx okay. I'm going to try to explain this. This green rectangle here on the left-hand side is the tags database. And this down here at the bottom is the viewer. That's what our screen's painted on. So that's where the bar graph and the slider are at. And when I slid the slider, it communicated through this. We've written this TCP/IP server, so it communicates through that to the tag database, and it changed the tag called temperature. It then updated the screen, and if I had a driver to go to a PLC, it would then update the PLC. If the PLC changed, it would come in through the driver and update the tag, and then update the viewer. In the case where I was just using that database SPY tool, I made a change in the database SPY, which wrote to the tag. The tag database knew that it had to update the screen, and then subsequently updated the bar graph and the slider on the screen. So that's kind of how the flow works. And I get a lot of questions at this point. Is there such a thing as internal tags and communication tags? No. A tag is a tag. It just can get its information from any of these sources. Could be a driver, could be multiple drivers. You could put the same tag in multiple drivers, and that's one way to share tag values between two different drivers, multiple drivers, between OPC, could go to a database, could go to your troubleshooting tools. So lots of different things here. So that's kind of the data flow there. All right, so let's go back to my PowerPoint here. I've done the bar and the slider. We're going to set this up to change screens, change colors, things of that nature. Let's do the colors. No, before we do that, I'm going to move down a slide here. I'm going to kind of expand this drawing that I have here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that full screen, that main screen, and I'm going to reduce it to this size. And what that is, I'm going to get rid of 150 pixels and 150 pixels at the top and position it down here, which is 150 pixels over and 150 pixels down. So to do that, I can go back into my development environment, open up my main screen. You know what, let me reduce this a little bit here. In fact, I can even close these here so you can see that full screen. So there's my 1024 by 768. What I'm going to do is right-click and get to my screen attributes. Alternatively, I could be on the graphics tab up here and go to attributes here. And in this 1024 by 768, I'm going to reduce this by 150 pixels. So if I'm doing the math right, this is 874, and this next field is 618. And again, I need to move this down 150 pixels and over 150 pixels to give me that point that I was talking about. When I click on OK, you're going to see this right edge move in by 150 pixels, this bottom edge move up by 150 pixels. And so that lopped off those 150 pixels there. And now I can save this screen here. And now we need to go create our top header. So if we right-click, Insert, and this is going to be the full width, but now I only want it to be 150 pixels tall. And it's going to start up in that top corner, so we can leave that 0, 0. By the way, that upper corner is 0, 0. I think I had this in this diagram. Yes, it increases, the X increases to the right, and the Y increases as you go downward. So in this case, again, it's going to be tucked in that upper corner. This is going to be our header across the top. Say OK. What you should have is this little thin screen like this. By the way, I'm kind of going over this fairly quickly. I don't expect you to follow me. If you go through our training class, this exact same technique is covered in the online videos on the training class. I do this exact same thing. Many of you have already seen that. So I should have this long and skinny this way, not up and down. If you have done this, you can go back into the screen attributes and then swap these around and then resize it that way. But in this case, I might put a company logo on here, or for those of you who want to actually exit your application without hitting those key combinations, you can put a button symbol here and make that an exit button, put that up in the top corner. You could hide this if you didn't have the right security level. There's a way to do that. Check out our security training video for that. And then you might want to also put a clock on here. Some companies don't want the clock on there. They want to be have the plant time be the official time, not having anybody leave for breaks early or things like that. But you can go here to date and time. I'm going to put a clock that I happen to like here, which is this one here, and just stick it right here. And we're going to put some more stuff up here eventually, but I'm going to save this. Now, a good way to save is to right-click on this tab and say Save. You can also come up here on this file icon and say Save. But what I like to do is just close this and trust that it's going to prompt me if I don't have any changes. And here I'm going to call this Navigation. And then I need that menu down the left-hand side. So that now I'm going to create this. I just created that header. I'm going to create this menu down the left-hand side. I'm going to insert. The width of that is going to be 150. The height of that is going to be, I need to subtract off that header that I just put on there. I called the other one navigation. I didn't want to do that. I meant to call that header. So let's do some troubleshooting and figure out how to change that. Let's do this. So there is a save as command. So what I can do is I wanted this actually to be header. If you've ever taken one of my training classes, sometimes I'll make mistakes, and I do that on purpose to show you a technique. And sometimes I make mistakes that are just accidents, but I'll never tell you the difference when I'm doing either one. So in this case, it's truly an accident, but a nice benefit is it's going to show you a technique. So I have that screen open, that navigation. I'm going to do this, File, Save As, and I'm going to save this. I really wanted this called header. And so there it's now called header. It basically made a copy, just like a save as for like Word or Notepad. And I can then go and delete that navigation. I don't need that anymore. And now what I want to do is go create that navigation. So I right-click on Screens, Insert, and I wanted that width to be 150. I need to take this 150 pixels off of here, so that'll be that 618. And this will be down 150 pixels, so it shows up right over here. So we're going to do that 150 pixels, but it's going to be along the left-hand edge, so that's okay. And that's what I expected that to look like. And I'm going to put a button on here, but I'm not going to yet configure it, and I'll show you why in a minute. I'm going to make that tall enough to hold 2 lines of text, because I know eventually I'll end up with 2 lines of text on there, but not today's presentation. So I'm going to save this as navigation. And my header was already open. So now I have those 3 screens. And what I want to do is one more thing. I want to open up that main area, and I want to right-click and change the background color of this to just a light blue here, just so you can see a little bit of a difference between this and the header and the navigation. And now that I have this, I have it sized, positioned, and colored the way that I want. I'm going to delete these 2 objects, leave myself with a blank screen. I'm going to use that Save As again, and I'm going to save this as something called Template, a screen name called Template. And so now whenever I create a new screen, I can just open this template, save it as. It's going to be sized, positioned, and colored the way that I want it to be. And then I don't have to do that every time. I just have to do it once. So there we go. Now I have 4 screens, but I want my header, my main, and my navigation to show up like this. So how do I get that all to work? Well, here we're going to create a screen group. I'm going to right-click, insert a screen group, and I'm going to give this a name. We're going to call this Startup. Now, this word Startup is nothing magical. This does not make it start up. I showed you that when we worked on the main screen. This is just to make it a little bit more humanly readable if you want to. Maybe you call yours main as a corporate standard. So I'm just going to call this Startup. And then I'm going to click on it. I'm not holding down the Control key or Shift key or anything. I'm just clicking Header, Main, and Navigation. I am not going to choose the template because I just want those 3 to be part of this screen group. I'm going to click on OK. And now to make this the Startup, I could either go to Project Viewer and choose that screen group, or I could go here on Screen Group, expand this, and right-click and set this Startup screen group as my Startup. Now, if I have all of my screens closed, and this is something to pay attention to, I need all of my screens closed. When I run my project, it will start the Startup screen, in this case, screen group. So there's all 3. And you know what? I saved the template with a different color, but I didn't save my main screen with a different color. So let me go back and fix that here. Make that same color. And save. Yep. And try running this again so we can see the difference between those. So here's the main screen area, here's the header, and here's the navigation. You can see where all those are kind of 3 separate and they come together. I wanted to show you now a feature that is the auto screen scale. So if I want this to scale, I can essentially check a checkbox, and this will make this as large as it can until it runs into the right side or to the bottom, keeping all the objects with their same aspect ratio, so it doesn't turn squares into rectangles, it doesn't turn circles into ovals. So if I go back into my development environment, let me turn back on my stuff down here in the bottom. If I go back into my development environment and go to Project Viewer, you're going to see this auto screen scaling. Now this auto screen scaling will auto screen scale my local viewer. So now when I run this, it will make that as large as it can. In this case, it goes all the way down to the bottom. You're going to have some extra space left over here because I developed this in a 4:3 aspect ratio, but my monitor is actually a 16:9 aspect ratio or widescreen. But you can see that it kept everything aspect ratio wise. It didn't stretch anything out of proportion. Still has everything on there. So here I can exit. It's going to prompt me. And again, while I'm thinking about it, if there's any questions, go ahead and put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel, and I'll try to get to those. If not, at the end there is Q&A section. So what's next here? Let's start to go back into this PowerPoint. Now we're going to do a color animation on here. So let's go back into the main, and let's say that I wanted to change this colors. I could add this color animation here, and what this has done again is on that rectangle that had the bar graph animation already on it, it's added the color animation on it, and I can say, okay, I want this tag. It could be a different tag. It doesn't have to be the same tag. I could take that tag and say, okay, from 0, I want this to be green. At 33, I want this to be yellow, and at 66, I want this to be red. And yes, those could be tags. Those could be tags or expressions in there. And if 4 is not enough, you could always click on here and get 16. And if that's not enough, you could change this instead of by limit by color, and you could do up to 16 million different color combinations. So please don't do that. I think 3, 4, 5 is probably enough. I saw a project that actually had 64 different colors, and they expected the operators to all know what they were. And by the way, if you didn't know this, about 10% of men are colorblind. So you should not show things that are just color only for status. And I'm going to show you a little bit more on how to do that in just a minute. So let's, once I have this, let's close this screen. And if you remember what I said a minute ago, if you have a screen open and you expect your group to show up, it won't. This is done by design. This thinks that you want to test this screen and only this screen. So if you hit run and have a screen open, what it's going to do is it's going to show you just that screen. It's not going to start up your whole group. And then you're going to have to remember, oh yeah, I need to Alt-Tab or Alt-F4 and close my screens and then run. And then it'll show you your whole group there. Before I forget, let me go ahead and uncheck that checkbox just to get that back to normal there. And one of the things that it's kind of important to understand about the overall functionality of InduSoft Web Studio is we're not compiling the runtime. This does not take all of this and compile this into a separate executable. This is making configuration files that the runtime then knows how to interpret and execute. And let me show you a quick way to understand that. So if I'm running my project, and excuse me here, I'm going to mute myself for a second. Sorry about that. I'm just coming off of a cold, had to clear my throat. So, okay, so I'm running my project here. I'm going to Alt-Tab back to my development environment. My project is still running. I'm going to open up my main screen, and I'm just going to put another object on this screen. Now, my project is still running. Notice that object doesn't appear because I have not yet saved this screen. If while I am still running, I save this screen, the runtime knows to pick that up, and that object just appears. If I move it and save my screen, go back to my runtime, it's so quick to make changes and develop in this tool. That's a real added benefit if you're going to make lots of changes and try to test things out and try things out. So I think that that's a real added benefit. I know some of our competitors actually compile and take several minutes to deploy solutions. So I think that's a real added benefit. So I don't know if I actually ran this here. So let me close this and run it and try it again here. And this should, when I'm below 33, it should be green. Then it changes to yellow. Then it changes to red at 66. So that's kind of how the color animation works quickly. And while I'm on this screen, let me show you a couple of different ways to do text. So if I wanted to show that value for that temperature tag, there's a few different ways that I could do it. I'm going to show you this text object. I'm going to click the text object, then I get this crosshair cursor, and then I'm going to click my mouse, and then I'm going to start typing. So if I wanted to display temperature, now this text is just static text. It doesn't do anything. Notice that while I'm typing here, that the text data link animation up here in the upper right-hand corner, this text data link animation is still grayed out. That's because there's no placeholders to put text, from a tag. So in this case, if I put a space and then do a hash mark or pound sign, depending on where you're at in the world, hash, 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 there. As soon as I put the first one, then the text data link became available. And if I just show you this text object, very similar to the rectangle, where it's just a text object. I can change my fonts and I can change the caption, things of that nature. Now I can apply the text data link animation to that, much similar to the rectangle that had the bar graph. This is text with the text data link animation. And if I go into that text data link animation, double click on this field, put temperature in there, then this will display that temperature. So if I save this screen, close it, run it, that should show the same value. Here is 82 as this. Okay. And if I wanted to make that an input, then I could simply just click on input enabled. I could put a minimum maximum limiting values if I wanted to. But with that, I can just save this, run, and I can change this slider here, or I can change the value down here. Let's type in 88, hit enter. It'll go right to that. Now, there's a little bit quicker way to do this. Let's go here, main. I could have just put my text object on the screen, types temperature, and instead of putting the hash marks, I could just hit enter. And when I double click on this, even though I don't have the hash marks in there and my text data link is grayed out up here, we put a neat little shortcut here. This similar to this text data link. If I click here while I'm inside the text object, what it does, watch what it does to this. It actually inserts a colon, 4 hash marks, applies the text data link animation, and leaves me right there to double click on the field, put that in there. I could do that. And that's almost the exact same thing, but it's, again, just saving mouse clicks. It's saving this time to help you speed development. Also notice, talking about speed of development, there's a couple of things. Number one, I don't have to close this properties box. Unlike some other competitor software that you have to dive into an object to configure and then say, okay, cancel, okay, to get out of, I can just click on these different objects. It doesn't even have to be the same type of object, and keep that properties box floating there. Another thing that's a real added benefit is many of you will have several objects on the screen where you might want to copy them and make duplicates. Well, instead of hitting right-click and copy and paste, or Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste, what you can do is select an object, hold down the Control key, and just drag this over here. You can even do this with multiples and very quickly create a full screen of already configured objects. Notice that these are already configured. And the other neat thing is let me go put a few of those back now that I've deleted those, is let's say that you wanted these to be different colors. I could stay at this properties level here and click on this and say, okay, I want this top level to be blue. I'll go over here. I want this top level to be green. And I'll go over here and I want this top level to be orange. And you can see I've configured those very, very quickly. So again, saving time in your development. It's a nice way to do that. So let's now make a navigation. Let's make another screen and a way to get to that other screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a button on the screen and act as a push button and show you a lamp. And so in order to do that, we're going to make it change screens. But first we have to make that other screen to get to. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to open up that template and do a save as. And I'm going to call this new screen button because that's what I'm going to put on there. And so it's made a new screen called button. And now I need a way to get to that screen. So let's open up our navigation. And here, I put this button previously on this navigation screen, but I didn't configure it. And I did that on purpose because I didn't have these two screens yet. So if I go on the graphics tab, once I have that selected, what I'm going to do is apply a command animation. That either makes this work with your mouse or a touch screen. So this is, again, very similar to the bar graph and the text that this is a command animation applied to that button. This text is just static text. Let's call this main so we can get back to our main screen and apply that command animation, which I've already done here. Now there are several types of commands that you can do, and then you have these different tabs. This is your left mouse button down while it's being held down and release of your left mouse button, right mouse button on down, on up, or double click, and then there's some other things over here for advanced multi-touch. By the way, if you're using embedded, you only get this left mouse button. You don't have your right or the double click. But in this case, what I'm going to do is just set this to, I could choose built-in language, VB script, open or close the screen, turn on a tag, turn off a tag, or toggle a tag. In this case, I'm going to open a screen, and that screen is going to be called main. Now, here is why I didn't configure that at first. I could manually type in the word main here to make it go to this main screen. But if I mistype that or forget what it's called, it's not going to go to that screen. So I like to always use this browse button here, choose from my saved screens, and that way I'm sure that it will go there. Now I want another button to go to the button screen, so I'm going to hold down my control key, copy this down, and then go change this to now go to the button screen. Now this is the command animation that will go there. I need to now go change the label. I could go either back to button here, or there's a nice little thing here. It's one keystroke or one click, and call this button. And now when I save this navigation, and I haven't done anything to this screen, so I need to do that. Let me just put a button on here. I need to do something to that screen, otherwise it won't let me save it. I'll close and save that. And now when we run, I should be able to see that I can navigate between those two different screens, same color background, positioned properly. That was the advantage of creating that template first. So now let's go work on that button. And what I want to do is maybe simulate an auto manual button. So I'm going to create a new tag. First, let me label this. We'll call this mode. And I want to make this a command animation. And I want this to be toggle a tag. And we're going to create a new tag called mode. I don't have this tag in here yet, so I'm just going to type it. And it's going to prompt me, hey, do you want to create this? I'm going to say yes, but instead of an integer, let's make this a Boolean. Say OK. And so it's made that tag called mode. And now let's make a way to show this. Let's make a lamp here. And I could very easily, and probably should, pull from the symbol library and go to pilot lights and just pull one of these nice lamps, green off, red on, vice versa. Or I can make my own, real simple, from just an ellipse. Now let me show you this. Since we don't have a circle object, you could make this from the ellipse. Very similar, we don't have a square object, we have a rectangle. And I could then go here into Format and I can resize my height and width, make them both the same size. That's one way to do that. Or I can manually type in here and say, okay, I want this to be exactly 100 pixels by 100 pixels and get exactly what I want. That's another way to do that. I'm going to then take that ellipse and apply a color animation similar to how we did the bar graph. And I'm going to show you in here that, again, this is the ellipse with colors. And I want that tag mode. And so it'll be red when it's off, green when it's on. And save that, run that, go to my button screen. And for those of you who are not colorblind, and I'm not singling anybody out, it's green, it's red, it's green. We should not, as I mentioned before, for the 10% of men that are colorblind, we should not show this in just colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of steps here. I'm going to show here on this caption field that I can actually drop down below this, and I can put curly brackets. Now, these are not parentheses. These are little, what they actually call set braces, or just braces. They're usually found, at least on the U.S. English keyboard, above the square brackets. I'm going to put a tag name inside of those. In this case, that same mode tag name inside of curly brackets, and it will show me the value of that tag. So now when I save this and run, I'll be able to see that right now it's on, right now it's off, but to most operators, ones and zeros don't mean a whole lot. So let's clean that up a little bit and show you, or let's do one more step. I want to maybe show the word on and off here right on this lamp. Since I don't have a caption field on the ellipse, there is no caption field, what I'm going to do is put just a rectangle over the top of this and turn off the border and turn off the background. And then I'm going to use this caption field and say, very similar to how I just did the mode inside of curly brackets, I'm going to put an if statement. Now, let me show you in the help system here in the built-in scripting language. If I look at logical functions, the if statement here is basically this is an if this expression is true, then do this, else do this, separated by commas. So I'm going to take that same idea. So if, and then enclosed in parentheses, if this expression is true, then the result will be this, else the result will be that. I could then assign that into another tag, or in the case of the caption field, whatever this results in here will be shown in that caption field. So what I'm going to do is replace this, and inside of the curly brackets, I'm actually going to say if, parenthesis, and I'll expand this in a second so you guys can see this. If mode equals 1, then I want to show automatic mode, or auto, in quotes, and then else, it's going to show manual, quote, close quote, close parenthesis. Now, let me open up Microsoft Word here so that I can actually expand this, just to give you an idea of the syntax that I'm doing. So if I come in here and copy this, go back into Word, sometimes that clears my buffer. It did not this time. So if I expand this, so this if statement is taking whatever is inside of the parentheses, and there's my, if this is true, if mode equals 1, then the result will be the string auto, else it will be the string manual, and that will then show in this spot. So it's either going to show the word auto or manual. Do I need equals 1? The answer is no, because mode will evaluate to 0 or true and evaluate this properly, but this makes it a little bit more humanly readable, easier to figure out. I'm going to close that and come back in here, say OK. And I might want to adjust the fonts and the spacing and the coloring, but for today's session, I'm just going to show you the concept of this. And if I run this, Go back to my button. So there's the word auto, and then there's the word manual. And you can see how the result of that. Now I'm going to take this same concept, and up here I'm going to build a little status area. So up here in the header, I'm going to put a rectangle. And in here, I'm going to put the time. Now, in addition to the, let me cancel this here. In addition to the project tags, the ones that you create, there's also system tags. Now, the system tags consists of things like the date, the time, the hour, the minute, the seconds, the weekday, yesterday, tomorrow. There's lots of them in here. There's actually a total of, I believe, 46 of these, and they do not count against your tag count. But I'm going to use the date, the time. I typically in a training class will use username and a few others, but I'm just going to do the date and the time in here for now. So let's go into this caption, and I'm going to do the text, time, and then inside of curly brackets, using that same thing that I did with mode, time, that's that system tag. I'm going to then do date, and inside of curly brackets, date. And then we're going to get a little fancy. We're going to get the computer IP address. And that's actually a built-in function similar to the if statement that I used before. I'm going to do the IP address. So inside of here, there's actually a built-in scripting command. You could find it in the help. I just happen to know it off the top of my head, which is get computer IP, and then it has to have the parentheses. There's no parameters, so I'm just going to do open and close parentheses. Then I have to close my curly bracket. And I'm going to come back in here and add something in a little bit later, but I just wanted to show you how this worked. So if I put that status up there, say yes, run, and you don't have to have this on the header. This might be on a separate screen that only the maintenance staff can get to if you wanted to. So there's the time and the date. Notice that I happen to be in the Eastern time zone in the U.S., so right now it's 2:32 p.m., but notice this says 14. You could dissect this symbol to see how we got a 12-hour clock with AM and PM versus a 24-hour clock. That's one thing that you can do. I'm going to dissect this slider symbol to show you how to open up symbols and take a look at those, so that might give you some indications on how to do that. So there's my IP address, the date and the time. I'm going to go ahead and exit this. And let's see what our next step is here. We did the change screens, we did the color, we did the text display and entry, tags. Let's talk about properties of tags. So I've been working with this temperature tag for a little while, and if I go back into my help system here, let me go all the way down to the bottom here. No, sorry, it's in tags. So the section for tags, tag properties, complete list of tag properties. What you have to understand is a tag not only holds the value of the tag, but there's lots of properties kind of underneath the tag. So not only is it just the value, but it holds things like the name of the tag itself, the size if it's an array, the description if you've added that into the project tags, the quality if it's not reading from a PLC or OPC, it'll tell you if it's bad, timestamp, the time and date when the tag last changed. If you want to read an integer bit value, you can point to B0, B1, B31 and get the individual bits. You can also set up the some scaling factors in here, and you can also set up the alarm limits. This is kind of neat because the alarm limits do not have to be separate tags. Notice these are read-writable. You set the alarm limits as a property of the tag itself. For the tag temperature, I would set a high limit, a low limit, so on and so forth, and that does not take up extra tags at that point. I'm going to scroll back up here to this timestamp one, and I'm going to give you an example because this is going to show me the time and date down to the millisecond that when the tag last changed. Now, the format of this is this little minus greater than. It looks like an arrow. And if I just go to my database SPY, let me show you my clock here real quick. So it's 2:35 p.m. in Eastern time zone in the U.S. And if I go to my database SPY here, and I just grab that temperature and copy and paste that, and I use that syntax, that minus greater than, and then type in the property timestamp, what that's going to do is show me the time and date down to the millisecond. And again, it's 2:35 p.m. I last changed this at 2:18. So it's been a while since I changed that. And, you know, quite a few minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes ago. I can't do all that math right now. But if I go then change the temperature tag, let's make it something changed here. Watch the value right there, 1436. It then updates right to the millisecond. And so if I wanted to, I could know the last time that changed. And very similar, you know, all those different properties you can get to with that same property pointer, that minus greater than. I can even take this, I'm going to copy this using Control-C, and I can go back to my main screen, and I could use a different object here. I'll use the text box, and I'll put this on the screen because I need date and time. I'm going to make this a little bit larger here, and I'll paste that temperature minus greater than timestamp in there. No reason to be input enabled because it's a read-only thing. And if I save, close, run, I can see that value. I can use that same syntax right in there. And watch this. If I update this tag, it's going to live update based off of that. So that's an illustration of how you can use the tag properties in your project. Let's see. I don't see any questions. So again, reminder, I can't hear you on this type of webinar. So if you've got a question, put it in the chat panel or the Q&A panel. And oh, let's see. What do we have left here? So that's a little bit about properties. Let's get into the drivers. Let's add, I don't have a PLC, but I do have a Modbus TCP or Modbus Ethernet simulator. So I'm going to come here into Communications, Add Remove Drivers, and I'm going to add the Modbus TCP driver. So when I add this to my project, and this is an area that we updated recently, slightly before 8.1, we made this so that you could add an unlimited number of drivers. Basically, it's limited only by hardware in here, so you could have many, many of these in here. And so in this case, I'm just going to add Modbus TCP in here. And once that's added, by default, I get this main driver sheet. I'm going to talk about that in a second. I do want to point out that this is an important point to understand. The drivers are actually independent from the product version. So in this case, when I installed that driver, it shows me that it's version 10.18. I could put an old version of the driver in my latest version of my project, or I could even take this 10.18 version of the Modbus driver, Modbus TCP driver, and put it back in an 8.0, a 7.1, a 7.0, or even a 6.1 version of InduSoft Runtime, and run it there. So if there's a reason, either validation on your project or something like that, this makes it really handy because the drivers are independent of the actual runtime product. And another reason why I point that out, that is why in the help system here, you're not going to find the individual driver manuals. There's a separate section here. So the driver manuals are outside of the product help. They're in their own little section. So if I wanted to see the driver manual for Modbus TCP, that's right here. And in fact, if you remember in the demo, I actually launched that earlier and happen to have that off screen here, and I'll bring that back on screen in a minute. So let's go to this main driver sheet, and there are several different types of driver sheets. The main driver sheet is one, and we're going to put that tag temperature in here. And I need to know, first of all, the first 16-bit address inside of the Modbus TCP space is a register that's 40,001. In this case, it's just going to be abbreviated 4X:1. That's going to be that first holding register. Now, I need to know what IP address this thing is going to be at. And since I'm on my local computer, that simulator is going to be just at address 127.0.0.1. That's if you don't know this in the world of Ethernet, that's your local loopback. Basically, you talk to yourself. But there's a little bit more to it than that. And this is when I'm going to open up this manual here, expand this a little bit, and I want to get into configuring the driver sheets here. And I'm going to scroll down into this main driver sheet section and find the syntax for that station field. It's the IP address, a colon, the port number, a colon, and then the PLC ID. And for most PLCs, that port number is going to be 502. It is selectable, it is changeable, and the PLC in this case is going to be ID 1. So I need to add on to here, colon 502, colon 1. Now that should set it up so I can communicate. The thing that I see most often not done that I would highly suggest is configuring these status fields. At the bare minimum, set up the read status. Now I'm going to put in a tag. I'm just going to type in RS for read status. I'm going to make that tag an integer. And I'll show you why here in a second. Let's see. This div and add field, I can put a division factor and an addition in here so I could scale this. So for example, if you had a 12-bit analog coming in and you got a value from 0 to 4095, you could take that 0 to 4095 and do some math on it and scale it to be 0 to 100 or 0 to 255, whatever that math worked out to be. This main driver sheet, basically you put all of your tags in here. It doesn't matter what memory type they're going to in the PLC. You can even put different PLCs in here. It'll optimize that communication and figure it out. This, by default, scans at 600 milliseconds. So 600 milliseconds, if that's good enough, you can put everything in here. If not, then you can add a different type of driver sheet. Let me split this screen here. Let me create this new vertical tab group. So here I have the new one that I just inserted, and here I have the one that I was working on. This is the main driver sheet. This scans at 600 milliseconds. You put everything in here, and it optimizes it. This is what we call a standard driver sheet. Notice here you've got those same 4 status fields, but now you can control when you read, when you write, and if it just does it as fast as it can. But the station field and the beginning address are up here in the top part. So if you're communicating to a memory type in the PLC, it all has to be the same memory type, whether it's integer, floating point, bits, and you would have to make multiple of these standard driver sheets if you wanted different memory types. A little bit more difficult to configure, but a lot more flexibility. And let me give you the understanding of why you might do this and kind of where we're headed as well. Back when I first started working with InduSoft almost 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, there was only these standard driver sheets, and you had to manually configure all of this. Then we added this main driver sheet, and it made it very easy to configure. You just put everything in here. I got a call a few years ago from a customer that said, hey, we've got 100 machines running InduSoft. Everything's running great on all but one. Can you come take a look? So I went there, and it turns out that in the main driver sheet, he had all of his tags, all of his PLC addresses, and it was running slow. It was about a about a 10 or 15 second update. And I went through his list, and at one part, he had his entire part number list that he could ever possibly run on that machine. He was reading from the PLC every scan. So he had 1,000 part numbers with 1,000 characters as strings that he was reading in every scan of the PLC. And I said, how often do you update that list? He said, oh, we only update that on Fridays at midnight. So we took that set of part numbers, we moved it to its own standard driver sheet. We only triggered it on Friday night at like 12:01, so it would get the updates. and got that out of the main driver sheet, and it brought his updates down to about 600 milliseconds. So that's kind of a way that you would use that. There's also some reasons, like if you're doing a pumping station that's an oil pump, maybe you only want to update this once per day. Well, you can put this at 24-hour scan time. You can make your own scan time using the scheduler and have this update only once every 24 hours if you wanted to. So that's some of the differences between those. Take a look at the driver training section if you want some more information on that. But I'm just going to do this. So remember, I have this read status tag in here. I have temperature. Let me go start up my simulator PLC now. Also, to get that driver sheet, this is a little trick that's often overlooked. My project was running when I save that. It's probably a good idea if you're making changes to a driver sheet to stop your project before you run that, so that'll all take effect. So let me go run my simulator here. Now, this is a simulator that we just found online. This is not something that we sell or support. Just take a look. Just do Modbus Simulator. You'll probably find it on there. This is automatically counting up every few seconds, every 3 or 4 seconds. So it's 4 or 5. And I'm going to point to this 40,001 address, this very first one here. Now let me right-click and make this always on top, and then run my project here. And you can see here that it's 10, 11, 12, and it's keeping up. And if you watch this, let me move this a little closer here. If you watch this first address here and I slide my slider up and down, you can see it change values. And if I come in here and double click and set this to 99, let's say, and it's automatically incrementing. Now it's off the top of the scale. Let me bring that back into view here, and maybe even a little bit lower. So you can see that. And what I wanted to do is go back in here to my header, and in this top little status section here, I wanted to add that read status. So I'll add com status, and I'll put that read status tag, or that RS tag that I put in that main driver sheet. And now when I run, I should get a 0. And you could probably, like I did with the button, you could probably say if it's 0, it's good communications, and if it's non-zero, it's got a problem. And let me go back to the manual here. And if I scroll down, and most of the manuals are structured very similar. The help section is actually almost to the very end. This error code status, this read status, if it's 0, it means okay. And every driver is a little bit different, so check this section of every driver. 0 typically means good, but not always. And if I scroll down here and look, I think I'm going to get a 16, which is a connection error. It gives you some ideas to troubleshoot. So if I come back in here to my runtime, and you can see I'm actually communicating still with my PLC, or my simulated PLC. If I take that thing offline, if I simulate cutting the cable, then I retry for a little bit, and then I get question marks. I'll show you where that comes from. And then I get this communication error 16, which is, again, right here. The question marks, if I go back into my project viewer, that comes here. Show question marks when quality is not good. There are some industries that you might want to see the last known value, even though it's no longer valid. There are some industries that you do not want to see an invalid value, and that's why we default to the question marks when quality is not good coming from the PLC. So if I have my project running and I start my simulator back up, start my PLC back up, you'll see it retries in the background, gains communication, and then starts talking again. So I really suggest that you watch that communications somewhere in your project. It could be real helpful for you. All right, so we've done tags, we've done drivers. I pointed out that drivers were independent. What I want to point out is on the InduSoft website, let me bring this into view here, you can actually go to products and download drivers, and you can download the drivers independent from the product version. So I was using 10.18 Modbus. If I come in here and I do MO Modbus TCP, let's see if it's the latest version of the driver. I can come in here to the MO TCP and see, yep, that's the latest version of the driver. Again, you can put the latest version of the driver into an older version of the product or vice versa. So you should always check on the website to make sure that even if you've got an older version, let's say you've got a 7.1 or an 8.0, make sure you have the latest version of the driver. Could solve some problems for you. So let's go back to here on driver. Let's add a trend into this project now. Get this out of the way here. And here on the main screen, I'm going to put a little trend right here. So I'm just going to put this trend object here and configure this. So I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to go into points, and since that temperature went from 0 to 100, maybe I'm going to label this as degrees C. I'm going to put the tag in here as temperature, and I don't have to put scale, but it will help it. It will auto scale if you want it to. I'm going to put it 0 to 100, and since this is temperature, I'm going to say I want this to be a red line. We'll do it a little bit thicker. We'll fill below the curve with red, but we'll only make that 50% transparent. Say OK, and it'll look something like this. And this trend object by default is, or I shouldn't say by default, it's really just a view-only object. It doesn't cause any of the logging. We'll do that in a minute. But if I show you this and I save this and then run my project, here's my value at 63. It's coming in there, and my simulator is still running in the background, so it's automatically ramping up. And so by default, this trend object updates once per second, so you can see that it's updating. You can make that faster or slower. So it's updating. If I change my value here, see that change, scroll up here, see that change. Now, again, I said this is not logging. This is only in memory, and if I change my screen and come back, it's gone. That data is gone and it starts over. Let's scroll this down. So let's get this logging, and let's go back to the development environment. I'm going to stop my project, and I'm going to go into this Tasks tab, and here's where I would configure where my trend log goes to, or my alarms, my recipes, my reports. And again, if you want to know how to do those other things like alarms and recipes and reports, feel free to take a look at our training videos. I'll point those out to you where they're at on the website just a minute here. But I'm going to go in here to the trend. I'm going to right-click and insert. And by default, this is going to go to a file on the hard drive, a proprietary file on the hard drive. Now, there's a way that you can turn that into a CSV file and make that humanly readable. That's a pretty easy thing to do. But I want to go, a lot of people want to know how to go to a database. So I'm going to configure that here in just a second. Let's just go do that now. Let's save this. And what I'm going to do is go to Microsoft SQL Server Express. If you didn't know, Microsoft SQL Server has a free version, which is SQL Server Express. It allows you to log up to 10 gig of data, which for many applications is enough, and it's free. Many people try to use Microsoft Access, which actually slows down as you get a fair amount of data in it, and SQL Server doesn't do that. So I highly recommend taking a look at Microsoft SQL Server Express for applications that are smaller than 10 gig. If you do the math on how much data you're saving, at what rate, how much data, you can figure out how much it's going to take up. But in this case, I'm going to use this Management Studio. And while this loads up, give it a second here, it will allow me to configure and create a new database. It's taking a long time to load. Let me close down a few things here and see if I can give it some more memory. Typically takes a little while, but not that long. Oh, you know what happens often is this sometimes pops up on a different screen. No? Let me minimize a few of these things. All right, here it is. So this is key to watch, especially if you're not familiar with this database tool. This is the management tool that's going to allow me to create a new database, but this is going to point to what's called the engine. So this is going to allow me to configure this SQL Express database. This is the name of it on my computer, and it's found on my computer. Later, when I configure InduSoft, I'm not going to use my computer name, because if I deploy this to a different computer, I don't want it to log data to my database. I might want it to go to the database that's on that local computer, that SQL Express database on that local computer. I'll show you that in a second. Here's the Windows authentication, which means I'm going to use built-in Windows security. I'm going to then connect to this management tool to the database engine, that SQL Express database engine. And when I click connect, it should open up that tool. Apologize, this is taking a little bit longer than normal. All right, looks like it's coming up here. All right, what I'm going to do is expand this databases section here, and you can see that when this comes up, I've done this demo quite a bit, probably a few hundred times actually. Wow, this is really slow today. Apologize for that. So here you can see lots of these Jumpstart webinars, and the last one that I did was in October. We're going to make one for December here in just a minute. So I'm going to scroll up here, right-click, create a new database, and we're going to give it today's Jumpstart name and date. This opens up. We're going to call it Jumpstart 2017, December 19th, I think. You know what? While this is loading up, let me go back into my InduSoft development environment. I'm going to go back into my project. There, of course, the database comes up. Yeah, let's stick with the database configuration for now. So here's the database configuration. I'm going to make that Jumpstart 2017, 12, 19. I'm going to click on OK. And if I go back into that tool, what this will do is create this at the very end of my list. And I'm going to expand this and show you the tables in this 2017, 12, 19. But the tables, there's no tables other than the system tables and the file tables. Those are just system-related things. I'm going to move this off screen here and go back into my development environment, and now tell it how to tie into that database. So here I'm going to go under Options, and I'm going to make this the default database that will work anywhere in my entire project. Now, if I knew this connection string, how to type this out to get it to go to my database, I could type this in here. I could even make this inside of curly brackets a string tag, and I could put this in my startup script and allow this to change during runtime if I wanted to. But in this case, I don't know how to do that, but I'm just going to click on this little wizard here. And so I could use Microsoft Jet, which would be for anything Microsoft Office. I could do, let's see here, Oracle. I could do Microsoft SQL. That's the one that we're going to want here. So I'm going to click Next. It goes to this second tab here. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Rather than using my laptop's name, I'm just going to use local and then that SQL Express. And this will be then portable. So if I put it on another computer, it'll log to the local version of SQL Server Express. You could put something else in here like a plant-based server, a cloud-based server, lots of different ways you can configure this. I'm going to use the built-in Windows security. I'm going to test my connection. I'm already talking to that database engine, that SQL Express engine. Now what I'm going to do is drop this drop-down down, and behind the scenes, it's just issued a SQL command to that engine and said, hey, tell me what databases you have. And there's today's database. It's returned that SQL query. I didn't have to know SQL, but it did it behind the scenes. Test connection. We're good. Say OK. And now it's built that connection string for me. And I didn't have to know how to do that. That wizard kind of did that for me. Here, if you're using a secondary database for redundancy, you could configure that. I'm not going to do that. It's a little bit out of scope for today's presentation. So now I have that default connection set up. And I'm going to go back into my trend worksheet here. Remember, I chose, instead of proprietary, I chose database here. Now I'm going to choose database configuration here. Here's that connection string that I just set up. It's going to automatically create a table in that database called Trend001. Now it gets that name, that default name, from this worksheet number. That doesn't mean anything to me. Doesn't mean anything to you. I don't think so. So let's rename this production and have that create a database, automatically create a table called production in that database. And I need that tag name in here. And it will automatically create the field based on this tag name if I leave this field empty. So field in database terminology means the column names inside of the table. So this will create a tag called temperature. It's going to do this, where's this at here? It's going to create the time and date stamped in there as well. And it's going to save based on the seconds clock. Now that's one of those system tags, the seconds clock. If I look at this down in my database SPY, if I go to the system tags here, the seconds clock is the same clock as my computer's clock. So it says 8, 9, 10, 11. So the word trigger in InduSoft is very meaningful. It basically means any time this tag changes. It's not only false to true transition, it could be true to false. And it could be, in this case, the tag second. Anytime it goes from 28 to 29, 29 to 30, or even rolls around from 59 back to 0, it just has to change. In that case, it saves on this trigger. Alternatively, I could save on any tag change. So if this entire list changes, or one tag in this entire list changes, then it will save the entire list. So you could do end of cycle. If you had a tag coming from your PLC, at the end of cycle of the machine, save a group of tags that were relevant for that particular part. Let's say that's one way you could do that. I'm just going to do this once per second. Say OK. And now when I do this, this should be going to my PLC. So, I'm sorry, to my database. I don't have my PLC running. So let's start that up here. I'm not sure what question marks are going to log as in the database. We'll figure that out here in a second, I guess. So I'm logging to 3. Let's scroll this up to 50. So once per second, that should be logging to the database. Let's bring the database back into view here. And let's, in my database, let's go into Tables, right-click, and refresh. There's where it automatically created that production table. And if I right-click and show those top 1,000 rows, it's going to do this SQL query that will appear here in a second. And it will show us the values. So there's the query that it did. And so there's the values that it logged. And looks like it had the old tag value in there. And then I slammed it down to 0. And then it automatically, from the simulator, came up to 1, 2. And then I put it up to 50. And it's still actually logging in the background. You can see I did this with no SQL. It did it all in the background for me. And so here you can see these field names, time_stamp. This one is the milliseconds, and then this is that temperature that came from that tag. I'm going to read these using the grid object here, this time_stamp and temperature, in just a second, but I just wanted to point that out. Let me get this off screen here and go back into, you know what, before I do that, I wanted to show you, remember how last time I changed screens and the values reset here? Since this is going to the database, I can go to a different screen, I can come back, and they're still there. That's because it's reading out of that database now, and it knows to do that. So let's go back into the development environment. I'm going to go to the graphics tab here on the main screen. I'm going to add the grid object down here. Now the grid object can pull from a text file, a class tag, or a database. In this case, I'm going to tell it to go to database. I want to use what data source settings. I'm going to use that same default that I set up. Here's that same default string that I had. And it's not going to automatically create. It tries to use a table that's named after the project name, but I want to tell it, go find what tables are in that database. So let's pull this drop down. It says, hey, you've got a table called production. So I say, let's use that instead of the default. Say OK. Then let's define the columns. So that first column was time, and the field was actually called time_stamp, and that is a text data type. You could also choose date and time data type. That would work. And this one's going to be degrees C. That field, if you remember, was called temperature. And that is going to be a numeric data type. And I'm going to click on OK. And save and run this. And you can see now that it's actually reading from that database all those values. And a few different things. There was an advanced grid object webinar that I did back in July. If you want to look on the website for that, they give you some really neat tips on how to actually embed some additional SQL information into this field cells there, and then also into this table cell to kind of increase the functionality of the query. You can also go here under Advanced, and in this condition field, you can build a filtering condition. So if you take a look at the, I'm not running here, so let's go back into run. If you take a look at this, I've got values here in the 50s. I've got a couple that are 1, 2, 3, and then back in the 50s and above 50. So let's filter that. Let's go here under Advanced and say, if you look in the help system, you'll see that this is the column name, whatever operator, like less than, greater than, equal, there's a few others, and then the actual value that you're comparing it to. So I want to say, show me all if the temperature is less than or equal to 50. And it will filter that and only show those to me. And the way this should work, if we run this, is there are now only in here values that are less than or equal to 50. So it's been able to filter that out. I could have thousands or maybe even millions of values in here, and it's now filtered that out. And what's also neat is similar to how we did the strings in the curly brackets, you could actually make this a string tag and change this during runtime to show different things that you want. You could have maybe a free-form field like this, or a button that sets this string tag to different values and gives you different views of the data on how you want to see that. So very flexible, very capable, functional object there. So let's, while we still have a few minutes, let's save changes to this. I want to show you a little bit more about symbols. So on the main screen, we have this symbol, this slider. And if you remember what happened is I went to the global symbol library here and I picked that slider 1. And when I did that, it put it into my project right here. And so now every time I use that in my project, it references this project symbols for that design. Now if I put another one of these on a different screen, let's say, if I copy this, if I just hit Control-C, I open up my button screen, paste it here, that is actually using that same reference. And you can tell that right here. It's in my sliders folder, slider 1. It's referencing that right there. if I try to put another one from my main symbols, global symbols, put another one of that exact same one, it's going to say, hey, you know you already have one, and you know you're going to overwrite it. Actually, I didn't do that because I didn't save the screen. Let me go back and do that. Let's try this again. So let's go here and go here, put this on the screen, and maybe they've changed that message. Interesting, because it usually barks at me and lets me know that there's a duplicate, or maybe it knows that it hasn't changed. Maybe that's something they changed. I'm not sure. Let's try this. Let's open up the buttons here, and let's kind of dissect this symbol here. If you wanted to change this symbol, maybe get rid of this percentage sign in here, I can show you how to do that. You can right-click on that, edit the linked symbol, and now this is the symbol editor. This is no longer a screen editor. It's actually the symbol editor. Now this symbol is normally grouped, so I'm going to right-click and ungroup it. They don't have to be grouped. And I can go into this text right here. And this is very similar to what we saw before when I was doing that temperature. There's that pound, 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 or hash, hash, hash. I can get rid of that percent there. And if I save this, then what happens is it removed it from here, but also it's removed it from all screens throughout my entire project. So now it's made that change. Here's another for instance, another example. If I come in here and I ungroup this and let's say I move this little plate out of the way here, and I know what I want to do. Let's do this. Let's send this all the way to the back, and then we'll move it forward a couple of spots here. There it is. And now what I want to do is open up the properties of that and change that to, let's say, this green color here. And now when I save this, it's saved on this screen, for example. And when I open up my button screen, it's changed it there. So that's one of the advantages of symbols, is that they reference that design in your folder here. And if you change them one place, they change everywhere. Let's make our own little symbol here, and we'll start to talk a little bit about some animations too. I'm going to use this rounded rectangle here and draw that. And this little extra handle down here is the radius, so I can change that, how round this is. So I'm going to change that a little bit. I'm going to use a button as my little slider handle here and get rid of the word text because I just want that to be a little handle there. And I'm going to tell this to go upward 100 pixels. So I need to put the position animation on here. And again, it's the button object with the position, visibility, position animation. I'm not going to do the visibility part of it. That's up here. Here's the vertical. I could put the tag, let's say temperature in here, but I want to show you how to do this create your own symbol. So I'm going to open up the help system here and go into the, where's it at here? It's under screens and graphics, libraries, symbol library, and then there's a save your own project symbols. So if I go into this and I scroll this, I know just from doing this a few times that it's about halfway down here. The syntax is a hash mark and then the optional category name. I'm not going to do category, but then the property colon value. So hash mark property colon value. Now, I wanted to point this out again here is remember these two columns, property and value, and remember that originally this tag name was blank. We're going to go create that here. So if I go into here, instead of putting the actual tag, I'm going to use that syntax, that hash mark, then the property name. In this case, instead of just calling it tag name, I'm going to say put tag here and colon, and then I'm going to leave that blank. And then down here in the range, I'm going to say $min colon 0, $ or hash, max colon 100. Let's do 255 to show that that's a little bit different. and then I want this to act as a slider, so I'm going to enable this. And I also want this to move in a negative 100 pixels. Instead of going down, now that'll go up. So that'll go negative 100, probably do a little bit more than that. Let's do 125. I would actually measure this using the status bar at the bottom of my screen to get that the right way. You know what? I'm not sure if I closed that and saved any of that. I did. Okay. So now the last step in this is to select the objects that I want to make into a symbol, right-click and say Create Linked Symbol. Now this is going to tell it where to put it in my project. I want this to go to Sliders. I'm going to call this My Slider and save that. Now watch when I double-click on this. It's created those fields for me, properties, put tag here, min, max. I can put that tag, temperature, or any other tag. In fact, I started to misspell it, so let me listen to my own suggestions here. And then when I run this, I closed it. Oh, I'm going to get this screen only, which I told you not to do that. So let's go back to the development environment here. Stop this, close this, run this. Go to my button screen, and now I should be able to slide this slider. And notice this gives me 0 to 255. And I've created my own slider. If I wanted to put my own text on here, I could do that. I could right-click, edit this linked symbol, put a text object up here with just hash marks, and configure that in exactly the same way as this. So I'm going to just copy this. I'm going to paste it in here to the text data link and center that. I get a little bit more pretty with this, spend a little bit more time, but I want to show you how you can do this. And I look at symbols not only as graphical objects, but as creating your own custom objects however you want to. So I hope that's a nice thing for you to understand. The last thing that I wanted to do is show you how easy this is to make this a thin client. And what I'm going to do now is, first of all, I'm going to hope that this works. Sometimes when I'm connected to the corporate network, this doesn't work. I am going to now publish my screens, save them all as HTML. So what this is going to do is save my screens that I just created in the native InduSoft format as HTML. These are going to be in the web subfolder of your project. And then the only other thing that I have to do is go in here to Thin Clients, open up this mobile access task. I just have to open up this once. This tells it to run that mobile access in the background. And at this point, I should be able to, if this goes well, run my project. And I apologize ahead of time because Chrome has been also running slow on my computer. I should probably just uninstall it and reinstall it. I might try it with just standard Windows here in a second if this doesn't open up. There we go. And if I type in my local address here, 127.0.0.1, and I can type in IWS 8.0 and go to my screen called startup.sg. Oh, you know what? This is now no longer version 8.0. We're in 8.1. And if I run this or go to that URL, I actually have Microsoft IIS running and pre-configured in the background. And this is the part that takes a little while. Normally on most computers this takes about 5 seconds, and for some reason on mine it takes about 20. I'm not quite sure. Someday I'll figure that out. But while that's loading up, what I'm going to do is open up Internet Explorer here and go to the InduSoft website and show you a few resources that we have available for you. So I already showed you the drivers page. And this is taking a little while too. Here we go. So here's where you can vote for InduSoft on the Control Engineering Award there. You can go to Products and Downloads and go to the drivers. You can go to, excuse me, hang on just a second. Sorry about that, needed a quick drink of water. You can also go to Sample Applications. You can see that there's a bunch of samples and examples that we have from alarms and the grid object and trends, things of that nature. You can also see web demos on here, documentation. There's tech notes, application notes as well. Let me take a look at the application notes. This one's really good here. Thin client troubleshooting, if you're trying to do troubleshooting on your thin clients. There's the blog, the corporate blog, is some really great information on it. I mentioned our videos. You can go to Support Video Library, Webinars here. And this is all the webinars that we've had over the last few years. There's over 150 of these. Here they're broken out chronologically. Here they're by category. So if there's a particular topic that you're looking for, they're in here as well. If you go here under training, you can go to our online training videos, and this looks like a similar page, but here's the 40 different videos that we have online for free. Don't even have to register. Feel free to take a look at those. You can also get at services if you want to contract our consulting services group. Let's see, what else is available there? Oh, here, this is ready. I'll go back to that in a second. So I don't have security on that page, on that application. So here is this application. Here you can see the trend, and right now it's off screen, so let me pull that back into line here. The grid object, the button, the symbol, the custom symbol that we made, a little handle here. Slide that down, go back to the main page. So here you can see just how easy it is to create that. There's our object here, our trend. And just FYI, the color underneath is not supported in the online yet. We'll get there soon. But I just want to show you just how easy it is to create. So this could be on a tablet, on a phone, anywhere remote. So let's go back to my PowerPoint presentation. Almost done here. Troubleshooting, database spy, showed you a little bit about that. Oh, I didn't show you the output window. In the output window down here, especially for communicating to the PLC, this is a really nice troubleshooting tool. I can right-click, go to Settings, and I can turn on Field Read and Field Write commands, the date and the time, and I can actually watch my PLC communications. If everything is okay, it'll say okay. If I change these settings and watch the protocol analyzer, that's actually kind of like Wireshark, and it's actually watching the bytes go back and forth to the PLC in that way. So really good troubleshooting tools. I can pause that. Let's see, what else did I wanted to show on here. I showed the help file, the website, training, tech notes, app notes, the chat on our website. So if you just go to the home page, if you don't want to send us an email or call us, you can do an online chat with our support or sales groups. There's a forum on here. Real nice to have users helping users, answering questions. You can see it's quite active, so a lot of activity there. Again, users helping users, sample applications. The symbol of the week. So if you go here under Store, Free Add-ons, we're adding symbols in here all the time. There's a whole bunch of symbols in here that you can grab and copy into your project for free. There's some instructions on each one on how you do this and how you install it. So if you're looking for some additional symbols, there's some PID loops in here, some thermostats, temperature controller faceplates, and different clocks. The list goes on and on and on. There's a whole bunch in here. So if you've got something that you don't see and you're interested in, here's a pump faceplate. Here's some binary displays that show you bits and integers. If there's something not in here that you want to see, send us a line. Send us an email. Let us know what you'd like, and maybe we'll get that in there for you. So with that, I'm going to open it up for any questions. And again, in the Q&A panel or the chat panel, and I don't see any questions. Hopefully this was some good information for you. I appreciate everybody sticking around. And I know this can get long, but I hope this will save you time in the long run. This was 3 hours of that might save you 8, 10, 12, 20 hours in the long run just by seeing on how some of this stuff works. So with that, I don't see any questions. If there are no questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar, but I really appreciate everybody joining. Again, don't forget to fill out that survey, and if you need additional information, you can give us a call. You can email us, info@indusoft.com, for sales and commercial type help, support at InduSoft if you need some support. And with that, again, I'd like to thank everybody, and really glad that you joined us. Feel free to let us know how we did on that survey. Don't forget to put your T-shirt size in there. We'll send you a free T-shirt just for joining us. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Really appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you, and thanks for your interest in InduSoft. And good luck on your project, whatever you're doing, and have a great day. Thanks.